Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for coming. If you've attended here the GIC talk sometime within the past few months, you may have noticed me standing to the side because I usually lead the Q&A sessions, just guiding the discussion between the speaker and the audience. Today I'm honored with the opportunity to present my own speech, and I'm happy to talk about a topic that I feel very strongly about. Today I'm going to talk about corruption. And I feel very strongly about corruption because it is such a vile and insidious thing. It tends to benefit the most powerful people at the great expense of the weakest. And that word is democracy. So, can anyone here tell me where the term democracy comes from? Anyone?
Greek.
That's right, it comes from Greek. English is taken from many languages, it's taken from French, Latin, Greek, the vocabulary. So it's very good. It comes from Greek. So, the English word democracy is derived from the Greek words demos, which means the people, and kratos, which means rule. So demos, kratos, democracy. In a democracy, the people rule. It's a very powerful concept, and it is something that has resonated with people and politicians for a very long time. It's a very, very popular word. What is North Korea's official English name? Can anyone tell me?
DPRK.
The DPRK, yes. It means the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. As I said, democracy is a very popular term. The worst dictatorship on the planet calls themselves a democracy. One of these variables is corruption. So what exactly is corruption? Well, it is generally defined as the misuse of public power for private benefit. And corruption takes many forms, including embezzlement, which is the theft of entrusted funds, bribery, which is offering a gift or a sum of money to buy influence, to buy political influence. Nepotism. This is favoritism to family or friends. For example, if you are in a position of power, a position of political power, and you use that power to offer a job to your niece or nephew or brother or sister. Now let's talk about the effects of corruption. What are the effects of corruption? Politically, corruption undermines democracy and distorts representation. I mentioned that Robert Mugabe rigged an election in Zimbabwe, and in the end, the people did not get who they voted for. If they may have, they may have democratic elections, but if it's not free and it's not fair, then it's not truly democratic. Okay, so let's look at the effects of corruption by studying two countries in Africa. Let's look at Botswana and Zimbabwe. Now, these countries are both bordering countries. They are neighbors. So they share many things. They share many things in common. For example, they share somewhat similar natural resources. They share somewhat similar geography, a somewhat similar demographic breakdown, and they share somewhat similar religious beliefs as well. So I think it's a fair comparison. The biggest difference is that Zimbabwe's population is 6 times greater than Botswana's. That is the biggest difference. But otherwise, I think this is a fair comparison. Okay, so Botswana. On the Corruption Perceptions Index, worldwide ranking, they were 34th out of 178 countries. This is the best in Africa. They have the most progressive government out of all the African countries, and they are doing very well on the corruption rankings. And next, Zimbabwe. On the Corruption Perceptions Index worldwide ranking, Zimbabwe was 100 places worse than Botswana. They were 134 out of 178 countries. They are not doing very well. Okay, now let's look at corruption all around the world. Okay, so this is Transparency International's map. This is their Corruption Perceptions Index rankings. Here you can see the scale. It goes on a scale of 1 to 10. The 10 is in dark blue. You can see the best countries, the least corrupt countries, are Canada, the Scandinavian countries, New Zealand. They're all doing very well. And I think a fair amount of Europe is doing okay. Australia is doing fine. The United States is doing okay. Although, to be honest, as an American, I think that that is too generous of a rating for the United States. Okay. So let's look at the worst countries. Okay, the worst performing countries you can see in Central America, a lot of the countries in South America, although Chile is doing okay, a lot of the countries in Africa, and for reference, here is Botswana. It is in the orange, which is, again, it's not a very impressive corruption ranking, but it is still pretty good. And next to it here you have Zimbabwe in a very dark red color. So you can see the difference between these two neighbors, Botswana and Zimbabwe. You can see Africa in general is very corrupt. A lot of Asia is not doing very well. The stories I hear in Russia, I read on the news that people in Russia, they will just be driving down the street and a police officer will stop them and just say, "Give me some money." Now let's look at Korea. Here's South Korea here. North Korea is in gray. We can't get any data from North Korea. We can't get enough data, although we can assume that it is a very corrupt country as well. So, South Korea. You can see that it is in orange, which is about the same as a couple countries in the Middle East, similar to Botswana, a couple of countries in Eastern Europe. So, it isn't extremely bad. But it is still bad enough that we can talk about it. It is not very good relative to other international rankings of Korea. You know, the Korean economy, what is it? Is it 14th or 15th? It is, you know, it is one of the strongest in the world. Let's look at some high-profile cases of corruption in South Korea. So, Yoon Myung-hwan. He was the foreign minister in Korea. He was charged with nepotism. He offered his daughter a job at the ministry. His daughter was, she interviewed for a job at the ministry. After her first interview, she was not accepted for a job. And so she was given another interview. She was given a second interview. And ta-da, she was accepted. Okay, so it's a little bit suspicious. Okay, next, Kim Tae-ho. He was the prime minister nominee. And he was tied to corrupt businessmen. He denied any involvement. He said, "Oh, I didn't, you know, I have no ties to this man." But then there were big controversy because a picture surfaced of him shaking hands with the man who he denied any involvement with. So he was forced to resign on charges of corruption. Shin Jae-min, he was the culture minister nominee. He broke residency laws so his children could attend the best schools in Korea. Lee Jae-hoon, he was the knowledge economy minister nominee. He was accused of speculative investment in real estate. This is something very frowned upon because they have, it's kind of unfair when they have a lot of knowledge, or they have access to knowledge that other public officials or non-public officials do not have. What are the solutions for corruption? What can we do to solve these problems? Okay, well, just think back to the causes of corruption that I mentioned earlier. Let's think about the causes. So if we can identify the causes, and then if we can fight the causes, then we can minimize the effects of corruption. We can help attack it at its root. Okay, so we need greater political and legal penalties for office holders who abuse their positions. Political, adverse publicity, and legal, you need prosecution under the law. As I said, you need accountability of the executive and the legislative branches of government to the judiciary, to the judges. Okay, what are the existing solutions? Well, I mentioned one of these in Korea. I said that Korea has the Korea Independent Commission Against Corruption, and it was established in 2002 to promote transparency and minimize corruption in Korea. It was later integrated into the larger Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission in 2008, which again, I mentioned that this diluted its role, and that's the reason that corruption, the perception at least, is becoming a little bit worse in Korea. Okay, so what can just normal citizens do? What can you do to help fight corruption? Well, the first, don't engage or participate in it. Do not be party to corruption. That's very important. Next, you can become a whistleblower. You don't have to be an actual investigative journalist to recognize corruption, and you don't have to be an actual investigative journalist to report corruption. You can become a citizen whistleblower. You can raise awareness of the issue of corruption as a general problem. As I said, one of the causes of corruption is that people become tolerant towards it. So if you're speaking out against it consistently into a large enough audience, then people are going to recognize how terrible of a thing it is, and they're not going to show as much tolerance for it. Okay, so you can see here Seoul in 1954. It was totally wrecked from the Korean War. 80% of it was destroyed. It was totally leveled. And now you can see Seoul today. It's a thriving, booming city. It's an international city, and by many metrics, it's one of the best cities in the world. So Korea has come extremely far in the past 60 years, and much credit to the Korean people for their nation's success. However, there is always room to improve, and that improvement can start with the citizens of Gwangju. This is the shrine of Korean democracy. That improvement can start with you. Thank you, everyone.
Today's topic was corruption in Korean politics, and I thought it was a very interesting talk. Everyone living here, I think, experiences or hears about these things, and Nick, the speaker, is very knowledgeable about American and Korean politics and is very passionate about the subject, so I thought it was really well received, and I thought there were a lot of great questions and a lot of interest from everyone. So it was, I think it was a really good talk. I think everyone learned a lot, and it's definitely an interesting subject to discuss, and a subject that maybe needs a lot of change in this country and in other countries. So it was great. I always look forward to new talks. Okay.
오늘 처음으로 지구촌 시민관계가 들었는데요. 제가 생각하는 거가 아닌 외국인들이 생각한 한국의 정치, 한국의 문화에 관해서 생각하는 게 저희가 생각했던 거랑 조금 다른 면이 있어서 오히려 더 신선해서 좋았고, 저희가 뭔가 익숙해지면서 잘못된 것을 그런 거 어떤 것을 잘해야 되는 것을 조금은 알 수 있었던 것 같아서 많이 도움이 된 것 같습니다. 다음 주부터 많이 참여할 것 같아요.
지금 매주 이렇게 GIC 토크 참석하고 있는데 이번 주 주제 자체가 제가 평소에 많이 관심이 있던 한국 정치에 대한 얘기여서 이렇게 일주일 전부터 많이 기다렸었는데 막상 수업을 듣고 나니까 정말 많이 한국 정치가 바뀌었구나 그런 생각을 하게 됐고, 그리고 오늘 연사했던 닉 백널 씨에게 정말로 감사하다는 말 꼭 전하고 싶습니다.